So, so the postures help in one regard, mainly on the structural level with the body, but the breath is really effective on the more subtle level, on the mind and internal. We could consider the breath like an internal form of medicine. It's really the breath, and through pranayama, that's why it's named pranayama, because of its effect or ability to influence prana in the body. You can stimulate the heart, the lungs, increase the flow of energy through the channels, the nadis. So ultimately, on the highest level or the deepest level of healing, it's all about prana chikitsa, this concept of increasing prana or our ability to intake prana. That's really what it's about. And pranayama is a very key thing. We mentioned yesterday how important the lungs and respiration is in health. If respiration or lung function is low or weak, this will have an effect and can affect the whole body and all systems of the body. And I have seen a number of studies, these have been done over many years, that the average individual lung function is at about 35 to 40% of actual lung capacity is being used, is about 35-40%. And there are a number of factors for that. Number one, cardiovascular health is very poor. More and more, less and less people are actually using their cardiovascular system in the way that we may have done or used it 50, 100, 150 years ago. We're walking less. We're gardening less. We're doing less in the form of activity. So the lungs stay at a lower resting heart rate. So the moment that you start to expand your lung capacity, your heart rate goes up, you start feeling heated, you start feeling things you never felt before because they're not conditioned and they're not, there's no sort of a level of endurance at that function, at that rate of function. So, many people will say, well, often trainers, personal trainers, and I was one for a number of years, we're taught, well, yoga isn't cardiovascular. Yoga is not considered cardiovascular. Now, can you say that today? No way. You were huffing and puffing. Easily, most of your heart rates were over 100 beats per minute, right? Wouldn't you think?
Oh, yeah.
Maybe more, 110, 120. So, and the standard American Heart Association and the Red Cross has said minimum 115, 120, maybe up to 130 beats per minute. Try and keep that up for about 20 to 30 minutes 3 times a week. It has changed a little bit over the years, but that's sort of a norm. And we just sort of leveled it off maybe at 10 minutes, 15 minutes of higher heart rate. We could have kept going. We could have brought in balancing postures. We could have brought in inversions. We could have continued with more pranayama. We only got to the faster pace for a moment, but that higher tempo of breathing is very effective for kapha. And I emphasize this type of pranayama in the morning and that faster pace in the morning to move the kapha out of the body. It's very effective. Did anyone feel the mucus, phlegm sort of moving, lungs opening up, chest opening up? Very, very effective. And if you combine that with other Ayurvedic modalities or practices like Neti Cup and a little marma, pinpoint a couple of marmas, that will open up those channels, circulation. You've got a great little recipe there. Great little recipe. So this is what we want to do, is emphasize Surya Namaskar, salutation to the sun in the morning, because it is solar, it's standing, it's working with back bends. There are 2 back bends, right? We start with a back bend, and as you come back up at the end of the cycle, you end with a back bend. And as I mentioned, spinal compressions heat the body and raise heart rate. Both are actually happening together. Blood pressure goes up, heart rate increases, and the balance factor also has something to do with that. So those are very good kapha type movements. Remember yesterday we discussed the importance of compress the spine, extend the spine. And it's that repeated action, compress the spine, release the spine, right? That practice, Surya Namaskar, is essentially a series of compressions and extensions repeatedly. Do you see that? Compression, extension. And it's that combination that actually opens and releases tension within the spinal vertebra. And yes, if you have discs that are compressed or even herniated, you would modify these things, but it does create more space between the invertebral disc, the space between the discs. So, healthy spine, healthy life. We have to keep this in mind. One of the themes of Hatha Yoga is healthy spine, healthy life, because the spine houses or connects to central nervous system. And we know that the nervous system is connected to Vata dosha. So it's very important. And we looked at everybody's spines yesterday, and we saw how the spine can hold different tensions, different alignment in various areas of the spine. I'd like to look at a few more today so that we can get some different examples. What we saw mostly yesterday was lower to mid tensions. We didn't see all lower and all upper, but maybe there's a few of us here that may have that, so that you can clearly see it and feel it in somebody's spine. So spinal health is very key. And the breath, we should never think that the breath cannot affect the spine. Because breath is connected to air is connected to ether. Those have an effect on nerves. It's actually the breath and the way that you breathe that determines the ultimate structure and shape of your spine. We find a spinal sort of irregularities or deformities in Vata types, scoliosis, or very tall spine with the slouching shoulders, right? Or the inverted lower spine. You see this often, the Vatas, especially over 6 feet. Because the spine becomes very long, it's like a tree, it starts to distort its shape. When it first starts to come up, it's solid, it's maybe has some more alignment, but then it starts to branch out. And this is common. So the breath can affect the spine, very much so. So